The Democrats invented Bernie Sanders by toying with socialism for a generation. Hello, this is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button. Today we're going to be talking about Bernie Sanders and socialism. He's the front runner for the Democratic nomination with another big win, this time in Nevada. That comes atop a win in New Hampshire and coming in second place in Iowa. I think South Carolina is probably going to be the final firewall to stop Bernie Sanders from becoming the nominee. Joe Biden's competing there. We'll see how he does, but I don't think if he wins, then it's going to throw the Democratic nomination into chaos, and it's going to go on for a very, very long time. And the real winner is probably going to be President Donald Trump when it all is said and done. That said, Bernie Sanders is the front runner right now. Usually you have to win either Iowa or New Hampshire to become the nominee. Joe Biden, he came in 5th place in New Hampshire. And so it's going to be really difficult, I think, for him to climb out of that hole. Now, Bill Clinton was able to do it, but he came in 2nd place in New Hampshire, so that's the difference there. George McGovern did it as well in 1972, not having won either Iowa or New Hampshire to go on to become the nominee. But in every other circumstance, in a competitive primary, the Democratic nominee has always either won Iowa or New Hampshire. Again, the exceptions were 1992 and 1972. In the Republican side, nobody since the modern primary system, at the advent of it back in 1972, has gotten the nomination without having won either Iowa or New Hampshire. Again, the Democrats are a little bit different. But right now, Bernie Sanders, with his big win in Nevada after New Hampshire, with 46.8% of the vote, puts him in pole position to become the nominee. Joe Biden, he came in 2nd place. He only got 20% of the vote. So Bernie Sanders is out competing Joe Biden 2-1 in Nevada. And I think that's going to, it kind of tells you which direction this is going in. Bernie's got the advantage right now, and the Democratic establishment has no idea what to do about it. Bernie's a self-described democratic socialist, and I don't think the country really wants socialism. Democrats, maybe half of them want it, but about a third of them are probably like, no, we don't like socialism. So you're going to have a lot of people breaking off and not supporting Bernie in this process if he gets the nominee, and that's going to probably help President Trump to win the election. That said, I don't know that anyone else would do any better in the Democratic side against President Trump. Bernie might actually do the best amongst all of them, but we'll get to that. Right now, the Democrats are panicking. They're going to have a socialist at the top of the ticket, maybe, and they have nobody but to blame themselves. If Sanders weren't running, they'd have to invent him. Democrats have been pushing for socialism for some time right now. After more than a generation of declaring that cultural Marxism is some sort of conspiracy theory, all the while the left was busy soft peddling socialism and radicalism in our public schools and universities, in Hollywood, in government and outside of government, in various institutions, pushing radical environmentalism to transform the U.S. economy such that now you have the Green New Deal being proposed by Democrats, which would end oil, gas, coal, nuclear forms of energy and converts to primarily solar and wind, and I think the U.S. at a global economic disadvantage versus China and other emerging markets. They also want to implement a national healthcare system. They want to eliminate private insurance companies. Well, that's socialism. And you would instead have single payer Medicare for all, so-called, or just socialized medicine. I think that's basically would severely disrupt the medical industry in the United States, and certainly would end private insurance. So that, again, is a form of socialism. And Democrats have been demonizing wealth and success for a generation, such that the national platform calls for redistributing wealth, raising taxes, and basically just pitting Americans against one another via class warfare, all the while disincentivizing work with universal basic income schemes. Bernie supports that. Until now, a full 50%, according to the NPR-Marist poll, of Democrats have a favorable view of socialism. Only 33% of Democrats have an unfavorable view of socialism. Now, most independents, 64%, also have an unfavorable view. Unsurprisingly, 89% of Republicans have an unfavorable view of socialism. And I think that if the election becomes a referendum on socialism, with 58% of the American people opposed to having an unfavorable view of socialism, Bernie's going to get his clock cleaned in the general election. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't eventually have a socialist candidate who can win an election. Quite the contrary. I think that President Trump, he's got the incumbency advantage right now, but you have a two-party system in this country. So if Democrats are going to say, we're going to be the socialist party, 50% of Democrats say they like socialism, and say that number keeps on growing, eventually you're going to have a nominee for Democrats that support socialism that can probably win. I don't think Republicans can win every single election. If Democrats put up a socialist every single time, eventually one of them's probably going to win. Now, the same poll has Bernie ahead for the nomination, 31% to 19%. And while the overall outcome shows 58% of Americans oppose socialism, that's a snapshot in time. Most people right now, when they think of socialism, they think of the failures in Eastern Europe, as well as in Cuba and Venezuela, as well as the brutality of communist and socialist regimes. And so that's how people view socialism right now. But younger generations, they have a more optimistic, I think, view of socialism. When you break it down by age, under 45, 38% have a favorable view of socialism. And that's the biggest predictor. 45 and older, only 20% have a favorable view. Now, millennials, Generation Z and millennials, this is the NPR-Marist says this is 18 to 38. They say 38% have a favorable view. Generation X, 39 to 54, 28% have a favorable view. Baby boomers, only 20% have a favorable view. And then anyone over 73, similarly, 20% only have a favorable view. And so a majority right now oppose it. But I think if this number keeps going in a different direction, you could see Democrats eventually, a majority of them, favoring socialism. And so that means you're going to get more socialist candidates. Give it another 4 years, 8 years, 16 years, another recession or two. And as baby boomers, older generations begin dying in greater numbers and younger generations become the prime voters in elections, eventually there could be an economic slowdown that would make socialism appear a bit more appetizing, I think, to voters when things are bad. And in the post-war era, World War I, in between World War I and World War II, you had the Depression, post-war Depression there, and then the Great Depression. And, communism was springing up, fascism, Nazism, alternatives to capitalism and democracy were springing up. And that's when I think socialism does a lot better politically. I don't think it's good for the economy. I don't think it's good for freedom, individual liberty, private property. The socialists, communists, they want to take away private property. Socialists generally want to nationalize private industries. And that could, that requires taking away people's property. And I don't think that most people want that right now. We'll see, give it another generation and you could see a different outcome. I think that it's conceivable, though, that almost all Democrats one day are going to support socialism. A majority of them will. That's the direction the chart is pointed in, unless something changes. Maybe if Bernie loses really badly in 2020, future Democrat candidates will kind of shy away from that. That's why, if you're going to have an election, a referendum on socialism, let's do it this year, because President Trump has a very good likelihood of being reelected right now. And so it's easier to say, let's deal with it in 2020 than to say 2024, when I think it's going to be more difficult to elect a Republican for a third consecutive term. In any event, Bernie Sanders, I think, is the party base's most honest representation at this point. He's the future of the party. The fact that he never registered as a Democrat and views the party's establishment as an obstacle to change, and yet he is winning handily, shows that he has bent the Democrats, the party, in his direction. He's winning the argument. If he prevails in the nominating contest, he'll have to prevail in the general election as well. That's less likely. The odds are against him. But he understands, I think, Sanders, that politics is a generational affair. What he's doing is setting the stage for future socialists to run, and I think compete successfully. If you look back in time, in 1964, Barry Goldwater, he represented small government conservatism, and he got wiped out in a landslide in 1964. But, just 16 years later, in 1980, Ronald Reagan, who delivered the keynote address in 1964, became the nominee, and he ousted Jimmy Carter, made him a one-term president, and on the same philosophy. So you can lose badly the first time, but then win the second time in politics. Reagan learned that. And if so, it might take another cycle or two. But if this is the direction Democrats are going in, given our two-party system, ultimately somebody a lot like Sanders will win the nomination and probably win an election. Even if he loses in 2020, he could very well set the stage for a future socialist president. So watch out, Bernie. You don't underestimate Bernie. He's actually laying the groundwork, I think, for a future socialist style government in the United States, believe it or not. Even as a majority right now, 58% say they have an unfavorable view of socialism. Watch for that to change. Now, again, South Carolina might be the final firewall against Bernie. It shows here a real clear politics average in South Carolina. Joe Biden's up by 5%, 27 to 23, 36 to 21, 28 to 23, somewhere in that neighborhood. And it's coming up on Saturday, so we'll see if Bernie can, knock Biden, I think, out of the race. If Biden loses South Carolina, he's basically finished, and that will be, I think, have Bernie cruising to the nomination. If Biden wins, then you have chaos, and this can go on for a long time, and Bernie may ultimately win anyways. For now, this is Bernie's moment to shine, therefore, and it provides a useful glimpse of what is in store for Democrats in the future. I think we should be paying attention here. This will be the first time American voters have heard directly from an out front socialist on the national stage in a general election. I'll leave you with the close here. I, for one, hope the American people are paying close attention to what Bernie is telling us this year. That's the commentary. This is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a good day.